Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I'm of course your host, Jack Knives. So first off, I want to address the elephant in the room before I get into the actual review. Yes, this isn't my normal background. This is actually my bedroom. I'm currently in the middle of transitioning my background space, so bear with me. Let's get into the review. Today I'll be reviewing Godzilla -1.
Godzilla -1.
Koichi Shikishima is a runaway kamikaze pilot. Going to an island to get his plane inspected, he is shocked to see a giant creature the natives refer to as Godzilla. As Shikishima is trying to establish himself and create a new life in a post-World War II Japan, Godzilla has returned to destroy Tokyo and anything else that gets in his way. So Godzilla as a franchise is either extremely beloved or just somewhat tolerated, but I've never really met anyone that outright hates the Godzilla franchise. The big issue with Godzilla as a character is that it's inconsistent throughout each interpretation. However, what I loved about this movie is it did the one thing that many of the other adaptations have been unable to do. Even though they've come close, this is the closest to being as accurate to the first ever Godzilla movie, Gojira, than any of the other adaptations, including the 2014 Godzilla, which I thought at the time was the closest, and even Shin Godzilla, which had elements to it. When you look at Godzilla as a franchise, you see a lot of inconsistencies, mainly due to budget limitations, timing, and overall trying to be marketable. But, I mean, I could say the same thing about Batman and superheroes in general. The big issue with Godzilla, though, is how it's portrayed. And one of the things that I loved most about Godzilla -1, as opposed to the remainder of the franchise and different branches of the timelines, even the Legendary series, is it brought the character back to its core roots. Namely the fact that Gojira, or Godzilla, the very first Godzilla, is and has always been a character based around the effects, the aftermath, and the warning of war and messing with nature beyond your understanding. This movie tackles it in such a heavy way and deals with subjects that most films really have never tackled in this sort of a style, at least stateside anyway. But let's get into the actual movie itself. I was astounded at the fact that it was a $15 million budget. Like, to put that into perspective, that is an insanely low amount of money as far as making a film. That's practically unheard of for a big blockbuster movie like this. But I could tell all of the money went into the actual effects of Godzilla. And it shows. It shows the love, care, and dedication that goes into the actual design, portrayal, and effects that go into this movie. Nothing seems out of place here. Nothing seems like it could have been cut for time. Each integral part of the story and plot flows pretty consistently, with a couple minor slow-moving moments, but nothing too bad. The chemistry with each of the characters' interactions is genuine and heartfelt and heartbreaking. One of the other things I loved about it is, not since off the top of my head maybe Grave of the Fireflies, have Western audiences been introduced to the concept of the aftermath of post-World War II Japan. It's a part of our history that we don't talk about, because we as a country have the blissful ignorance and luck of not having our actual constructive society attacked during World War II. Yes, Pearl Harbor, but not having the majority of our country actually attacked by the devastation of a war. That is a privilege that we as a society have that a lot of countries do not get. And that's the sad truth of it is. But to interpret it into the aspect of the horrors of war leading into the horrors of an unstoppable force, it brings the terror level of reality and fantasy into one another, but not in a heavy-handed way. The only major significant issue that I actually had with the movie unfortunately, is the main character. He is the most irritating, unlikable character in any Godzilla movie I've ever seen. And yes, that even includes Matthew Broderick in the American Godzilla. I would take him over this character. For context, he's a runaway kamikaze pilot, and he's dealing with survivor's guilt, PTSD, and all of that, and I understand that completely. However, there are instances in the movie where it's not a matter of like, oh, you can't use the whole context of, oh, he's dealing with PTSD. It's just him being a cruel man. Just him just being mean for literally no reason. It's just him being mean for the sake of being mean. Like, he doesn't have an actual reason to be that way. A lot of the main side characters are really, really enjoyable and genuinely fun characters that you could see in like any kind of old Godzilla movie, or even in like a lot of some anime where it's just like, yeah, where they're not too heavy-handed in what they're doing, but they're just the right amount of support. But the main standout star for me was Minami Hanabe as Noriko. She had this genuineness, went from this kind of street rat kind of character of like almost like a refugee and kind of survivor into a genuinely loving, caring mother figure, and then into a actual adult. And it was a natural flowing progression for that style of character. It showed really, really well character development, and when she was in danger, I can't speak for anyone else, my heart sunk. I'm like, no, not Noriko, no. And it added to that element of suspense of like, oh my gosh. When Godzilla attacks, especially in the city scene, his devastation for not just attacking Japan, because we've seen that in multiple movies. This is a post-World War II Japan that is not only just recovering, but is extremely unequipped to deal with something of his scale, even if they had a fully armed force, which they don't. It is purely like, I hate saying it, but almost like them dealing with a separate atomic bomb, but a moving atomic bomb that is always unhinged and has a mind of its own. And I know that's the intent of the story, because that's how the story is progressing in the movie. I haven't enjoyed like sitting down and watching a Godzilla movie in like a long time, because after you watch a couple of them, they kind of start flowing together. But this one specifically stands out a lot on its own. It has a lot of grounding, it has a lot of things to step up to, and I'm so insanely happy that so many people in the mainstream audiences have enjoyed it. It proves to the world you don't need a giant budget to make a blockbuster. And it also proves to people that you don't have to necessarily be of that mindset or country. As long as you establish a foundation for the audience to cling on to, you can have a great time. And overall, it's a movie that I can really see putting into my collection as far as putting on the shelf of my physical collection of movies. It's definitely up there. It is a movie you should see in a big screen. I give Godzilla -1 4.5 out of 5. Have you seen Godzilla -1? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I'll see you next time.